Hi, welcome. My name's Roberta Yuan. I'm one of the co-directors of this year's Asian American Association Conference. I'd like to welcome you to our largest and most extensive event yet. Though activism is generated through ideals and visions, it is implemented through practical skills and effective organization. We feel that a blend of both elements is essential in developing leadership among Asian Americans, and we hope that the conference is itself a manifestation of the ideals that we advocate. We're extremely excited to have Harry Wu with us at this event, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Alan Counter, who is a professor of neurology and neuroscience at Harvard Medical School and director of the Harvard Foundation at Harvard University.
Thank you, and good afternoon, students, faculty, friends, community members. It is my privilege to introduce to you today a very distinguished guest of honor of the Harvard Foundation, the John F. Kennedy School of Government, and the students of the Asian American Association. Mr. Harry Wu was first arrested as a young student in Beijing Geology College for speaking out against the Soviet invasion of Hungary and criticisms of the Chinese Communist Party. In 1960, he was sent to the Logai, China's Gulag, as a, quote, counter-revolutionary. During the next 19 years, he was imprisoned in 7 different forced labor camps all around China, where he was forced to manufacture chemicals, mine for coal, build roads, clear land, and plant and harvest crops. He survived beatings, torture, and starvation. He witnessed the death of many of his fellow prison inmates from brutality, disease, starvation, and suicide. Finally, he was released in 1979. Mr. Wu came to America in 1985 as visiting professor of geology at the University of California, Berkeley. Later, he began writing about his experiences and became a human rights activist determined to expose the truth about the Logai, the most extensive forced labor and thought reform camp system in the world. He is the author of Logai, the Chinese Gulag, a theoretical explanation of the Logai system in communist China, and Bitter Winds, his autobiography published in 1994. He has been invited to testify before various congressional committees, as well as to British, French, German, and Australian parliaments, the European Parliament, and the United Nations. In the summer of 1995, he was arrested by the Chinese government when he tried to legally enter the country. He was convicted in a show 4-hour trial of, quote, stealing state secrets. He was then sentenced to 15 years, but later expelled as a result of extensive international campaigns launched on his behalf. Since his release, he has continued to travel the world to tell of the abuses of the Chinese government toward its own people. He is now the executive director of the Logai Research Center and Foundation, a nonprofit organization committed to documenting the Logai system. And he's a research fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. He has received numerous awards for his activities, including the Hungarian Freedom Fighters Award in 1991, and in 1996, the Guzian Medal of Honor from the Dutch Foundation for the Guzian Resistance Movement. And I can say to you finally that I've had the privilege of hosting Mr. Wu for the past 2 days, and I have enjoyed every moment of being with this compassionate, this very decent, this very concerned man who has dedicated himself to principles that we all believe in, not just for the people of China, but for all of us who believe strongly in liberty, freedom, justice for all human beings. It is my privilege to introduce to you at this time Mr. Harry Wu.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is my honor to come over here. And this is the second time I regained my freedom. And this time only takes 66 days, quite short. But the first time, it took 19 years. I came to the United States, the country of freedom, in 1985. I tried to forget my past, suffering in the Chinese gulag. That was only natural. I'm but a man as a human being with emotions and weaknesses like anyone else. I want to enjoy my rest of my life in a peaceful place and starting on my family, to love and be loved. I try to keep myself very busy and looking into the future. I want to turn the page over. But no matter what I was doing, it's very hard for me. Forget about these people pass away and never come over here, never can available to come over here and tell their own story. So today I'm over here, not like a kind of hero, just simply like a survival. Maybe a representative of these millions nameless and faceless people come over here, tell you one of the story. Maybe just like a piece of a brick on the Chinese Great Wall. I withdraw it. Through this tiny hole, you can look into inside all of these ugly truths. In 1957, I was a geology student. I'm the captain of the baseball team of our university. I'm not a politician. I never involve politics, either side, counter-revolutionary or revolutionary. But I was invited by the party to express my mind. I very naturally criticized the Soviet invasion in Hungary. It seems to me this is a violation of the international law. And also criticize the Soviet Chinese communists to treat ordinary people as a second-class citizen. And because I come from a so-called bourgeois class, my father was a banker, and I'm Catholic. And you know, these classes and these background become the target of the communism revolution. I lost my freedom, I lost my future, and I was only 20 years old. Of course I have the rights to looking for another opportunity. I tried to escape. They find out, arrest me, and sentence to life to the Chinese gulag. Until 1979, I spent 19 years in this brutality system. In the camp, alongside millions of prisoners, I was forced to labor under the constant threat of hunger. The communists restored a subtle, efficient method to make the prisoners confess hungry. In China, all prisoners forced to labor, and everyone have a daily labor quota. If you cannot complete the labor quota, your food will be removed, will be reduced. The police guard will tell you, no labor, no food, no labor, less food. Labor in camps mostly is primitive, reclaiming the wasteland, building the railway and highway, building the dam on the river. But since Deng Xiaoping come to the power, the government have a new Laogai policy and use the cheap labor to produce different camp products for domestic market, also as well as international market. Today, there's a lot of products export from China in United States market. In your store, you can find it, like toys, rubber shoes, artificial flower, machine tools, steel pipe, graphite products. Until today, American Customs Service issued 26 detention orders against Chinese illegal products. Because according to federal law, since 1930s, American not allow any products made by convict, made by forced labor, import from anywhere, from any countries. But from 1930 to 1960s, in the 60 years, the federal law only applied twice. Once against the products made by Mexican prisoners, and the other one against it come from Soviet Gulag. But from 1991 until today, there's a 26 detention order against Chinese illegal products export to the United States. And it's continuing and coming over here. In 1991, I back to China to assist the CBS 60 Minutes to produce the Chinese Laogai program. Beijing government put my name on the blacklist, and they wanted me. I still tried several ways and several times to go back, but I failed. In 1994, I naturalized as an American citizen. So I have a new passport, American passport. And I legally changed my name as a Peter Wu. So I also received a visa, and I safely passed the border and get into China with the BBC correspondent and also my colleagues. I promised to my partner, once I pass border safely, inside China, I just like a fish in the ocean. They never can find me. They knew me very well. I also knew them very well. In April and May in 1994, I visited more than 27 labor camps from the far west in Xinjiang area in the desert to the far east in Shanghai, and also go to the Manchuria in northeast. I come out from a small border in the east coast. Total, I stayed in China around 5 weeks. In February 1995, I tried to test the Chinese embassy, how much they know about me. Because after 1994, the BBC aired 2 documentaries. One is Chinese bamboo gulag. The other one is harvest organ from death row prisoners. Chinese got very, very angry about me. But I want to know how much they know about me. I'm not ready to go again. But very surprised, unexpectedly, I received the visa again from Chinese consulate located in Houston. I don't know what is it, because I think maybe this is a trap, this is a setup. But maybe this is an administration mistake. And maybe they're telling me that, are you dare to come? And they challenge me. And I take the challenge. In June, I'm ready, and I went on. But I caught at the border. The border between Xinjiang and Kazakhstan. I thought this is a very remote area, probably easy to get in with my legal passport and valid visa. But this is my mistake. Today, the Chinese government have a complete computer system at the border. They flagged my name out from their database. They caught me at the border. Well, I held in China during 66 days since June 19. My family and my friends are naturally worried about my personal well-being. They knew the courage that I survived for my 19 years in 12 different labor camps. But be honest with you, this time, there's no physical torture applied to me because I hold American passport. And because I'm American citizen. I treated very differently. I didn't serve another 15-year sentence. They expelled me right away. But thinking of it this way, it's totally against my will. And I have legal passport and valid visa. I didn't get in the country. They arrest me at the border, take me into China, and accuse me as a spy. And every day I make a statement, say, according to your law, you have to give me your detention order. You have to give me your arrest warrant, according to your law. And also according to the agreement between United States and China, you have to inform my embassy in 48 hours. And I have the rights to contact and got the advice from my embassy. And I refused to answer before I have the connection. And the senior police from the national security told me, forget about it. You are very special. We know you are coming. We are waiting for you. So I was under secret arrest in the first 20 days. I was traveling around in China, escorted by a large number, between 8 to 7, sometimes more than 20 plainclothes police. I was frightened to death every day. And they say, we just want to solve your problem. Okay. You are the most troublemaker from the overseas Chinese. But I think this is a very higher compliment to me. It is true I'm the troublemaker to them, because I always try to expose the ugly truth for the communism. Today in the world, today in this hall, all of you condemn the Hitler concentration camp, deny the Soviet Gulag. But can you ignore it? Today in communist China, there's a huge labor camp system. Okay. According to common knowledge, every totalitarian regime must maintain a suppression system. Hitler did, Stalin did. Communist China, they don't have it. Why? Since 1949 until today, it's almost 46 years, 47 years. We know very small, very little. In communist China, there's a huge labor camp system. According to my estimate, probably since 1949 to today, 50 million people thrown in the labor camp. How many survive? I don't know. I'm one of the millions, luckily. Most of them physically, mentally destroyed. Okay. Today, how many camps? We identified more than 1,100. One Chinese document admitted 685. And the other internal document that admitted more than 1,000. But this is state secret. That's I'm stealing. I try, and I will continue to steal the secrets. We have to know, right? And there's around 8 million people today still suffering in this brutality labor camp system in China today. Maybe you want to ask me, how many political criminals? In 1950s, 80 to 85% of the prisoners, so-called counter-revolutionaries. Because Chinese labor camp system designed as a machine to destroy, to abolish counter-revolutionary class. It means landlord class and bourgeois class. Okay. You have to know, in the first 30 years in China, even you commit a crime as a thief, as a robber, as a murder, they have to list your class background. If you and me, we involved in the crime as a thief, but if your class background is different with me as a landlord class, you deserve is a very serious, very heavy sentence, punishment, because your action is behave as a counter-revolutionary class. So, Hitler and Nazi divided people by races. Stalin and Mao, the communism divided people by their economic status. Separated people in different groups, using the government power, established the labor camp system, destroyed it. But concentration camp finished 50 years ago. Soviet Gulag also dismissed. But today in our human society, there is a huge labor camp system still exists. Not only make profit, not only earn foreign exchange, but also try to so-called reform. You will say this is brainwashing. What is the most effective way to control people, to destroy the people? Using your power, using your gun, using your force? Yes, they have to endure and obey to you. But this is not a clever way. The most effective way is brainwash. So all the prisoners, even today, even you are petty thief, you are murder, even you are rapist, when you sentence to the camp, the police will tell you, you know, how can you become a criminal? Because you have so many bourgeois idea, landlord class idea, exploiting class idea. We sentence you 5 years, not only for punishment, but also we want to reform you, become a new socialist person. Become an unthinkable robot. Keep you as a labor, make profit, but your brand is replaced. In the 66 days in China, they try to eliminate it, but under the international pressure, especially the pressure comes from American Congress, comes from American people. For example, the Shanghai mayor come to San Francisco, and all the American people went to the conference. Everybody waving a small yellow ribbons. And the mayor said, what are these people doing? Oh, our American mayor from San Francisco had to explain to him they're calling free Harry Wu. It's really impressed them. Really very, very big impact on them. So later in July 8th, the government issued an official arrest warrant, and I feel I'm okay. They cannot destroy me, and they will not defeat me. And I say, now going to a new procedure, so-called safe phase. They want to go in so-called judiciary procedure and have an interrogation, have a setup, have a trial, and then kick me out. I feel I'm safe now. Of course, in the first 20 days, probably I will receive a kind of treatment, a kind typical Laogai function. I forced to kneel down, a single bullets shoot from my back, from my head. But it's over. I have 4 hours trial. They want to show you everything so-called according judiciary procedure. Yeah, I have appointed a lawyer for me. Okay. Of course, this is a communist lawyer. Until today, just last week, I called my lawyer in China. I threw my embassy in Beijing to contact him. I asked him to give me the original document. He said, I can't give it to you. I said, come on, I hire you. I pay 6,000 yuan. And you cannot give me your paper. What is it? He said, I'll be honest with you. National security not allowed to give it to you. And this is a lawyer. But this is a progress. You have to do, in 1960, without a trial, I went to the camp. And this time, I have a trial. I have a lawyer. Well, you can say this is a kind of progress. And then next day, August 24, they announced the verdict. And they asked me, say, do you want to appeal to your sentence? According to Chinese law, you have the rights. And I said, I will. And then she said, forget about it, okay? So I right away put on the airplane and back to San Francisco. But Chinese propaganda today, they said, I give up to appear. But I can show you the tickets. The tickets bought it before they announced the verdict. Even Senator Feinstein, she told me in August 24, he was waiting for back to the United States because he went to China, talked to the General Secretary of the Communist Party, Jiang Zemin, tried to free me. And he said, Jiang Zemin said, well, I cannot help you because our judicial system is independent. I cannot, intervene for these things. But in the morning, when he waiting for the airport, a special officer from Beijing, from Jiang Zemin office, informed Senator Feinstein, today, Harry Wu will deport back to the United States. Hey, I said, what's happened? This is before they announced the verdict. In the 66 days, I only received 2 interviews from my embassy. 30 minutes, that's it. Okay. And I'm not allowed to listen to radio. I cannot make any phone call. There's no newspaper at all. Even my wife's letter, not allowed to give it to me. Only allow the American Consul General read it for me. And then later I ask some books from maybe some newspaper, but only I receive a couple of books. I only can using that way, that kind of method to deliver message. Okay. I particularly asked 2 books. One is Moby Dick. The other one is Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and Sea. Because my wife understands why I want this book. Because there's 2 sentences in there. One is, man is not made for defeat. The man can be destroyed, but not defeated. But American consul also want to deliver some message to me. And she said, we saw you on CNN. You are so famous. Everybody know about you. I'm very surprised you have so many friends in Congress. Do you know there's a yellow ribbon something? And then the police cut off the connection because we all talk on the phone. Anyway, later I feel I'm okay. Just going to the pre-arranged processing and I will get out. Our 20th century had witnessed many catastrophes in human society, killings during the 2 world wars, mass destruction by atomic bombs, rapid spread of AIDS, which put together are far driven by the experiments in bringing about the idea of communism in politics, economics, cultural, morality, human rights, and human life. The costs we have been to pay for it is too high to account. In 1848, Marx and Engels, they make an announcement about the Communist Party began. They said, a specter, communism is hovering over Europe. 69 years later, in 1917, the specter landed in Russia and take root. And another 30 years passed until 1949. It blossomed in mainland China. In the middle of the 20th century, communism spread power in one country after another. In certain Western democracy, communist parties were strong enough to come to power, for example, in Italy and in France. And the saying at the time, quote, "The old world shall be replaced by the new world," was causing a temporary outcry. However, before long, beginning in the 90s, a series of communist power, big and small, like fallen leaves swept away by the wind, simply disappear from the horizon. All these communist specters struggled briefly before they were washed down to the big river into the sea. They tried to survive themselves, but none of them succeed. But today in China, under the Deng Xiaoping direction, they try to adopt the capitalism way, develop their economic system, keep themselves unstable. Can they work out? And this is the big issue in the next century. But we have to know there's a basic contradiction today in China in the transition. The communists don't want to give up the power. They don't want to change their economic system as state-run enterprises system, or you can say public ownership system. Before the ownership system be completely changed into capitalist system, there's no real economic boom. You can see what's happened today in China. The debt of the country is come to up and up. The agricultural production is come to a stage as a neck of the bottle. But the Western company and businessmen is very, very deadly attracted by the cheap market and huge labor forces and cheap labor force over there. And this is the problem. And many people today is talking about China possibly in next century become economic giant. But very people remind you, economic giant also mean political giant, also mean military giant. Today China is available to sell the advanced missile to Iran and Iraq. Recently they sell nuclear weapon to Pakistan. The people of the world just have a kind of relief in 1991. They saw the Berlin Wall peacefully turn down. That Cold War finally is over. But if in next century there's another communist giant in front of you, and the Americans have the experience in Korea War and Vietnam War, deal with the Chinese communists and what you can do and how to handle it. And this is a very serious problem. That I'm suggesting today we have to debate on American China policy. Let me go to the conclusion. Driven by ideology and party directives and dictators' orders, the Chinese Communist Party established a repressive system, so-called Laogai, designed to control and eliminate the people with their different political viewpoints or religious believers, and those who have with different concept of the society. And this is the fundamental crime in our human being society. History has seen similar crimes in Hitler Germany, Stalin's Soviet Union, and Pol Pot's Cambodia. And in Deng Xiaoping's China, the criminal legacy remains. We believe in a simple truth. Democracy cannot exist in China as long as the Laogai system exists. We cannot condemn the evil action of the Hitler concentration camp as Stalin gulags and ignoring the continuing brutality of Chinese Laogai. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Wu wishes to have you view a short film, so if we can begin rolling the film there on the subject that he has addressed today. Please, film and lights. We'll have questions immediately after this for those of you who would like to ask Mr. Wu some questions. So, have a seat.
If the label says made in China, what it doesn't say is made in China by prisoners in forced labor camps. Prisoners whose only crime may have been speaking out against the system, preferring democracy to Chinese communism. And on many garments and many products, that's the case.
May we have the
That's
lights,
why
please?
Congress wants to attach conditions before they agree to renew China's most favored nation trade status, or MFN as it's called. President Bush supports renewing China's preferential status without conditions and informed Congress that he's obtained a firm, high-level commitment that prison labor products won't be sold to the U.S. Are the Chinese keeping their word? Not from what we saw in China just a few weeks ago. In a remote prison camp called Tonggamu in the barren foothills of the Tibetan Plateau, we took these pictures of prisoners marching to work in blue uniforms. Many of these inmates are here for life. In another camp in the capital of Qinghai province, these prisoners are processing sheepskin and making leather goods which, as we discovered, will end up in stores across America and around the world. The videotape was shot by Harry Wu, former Chinese political prisoner now living in California. He agreed at great personal risk, since he's still a Chinese citizen, to go back with a hidden camera to do what no outsider has ever done before: take pictures inside Chinese forced labor camps.
You spent a total of how much time in prison?
19 years.
19 years.
Yeah.
Harry Wu's crime? As a student, he spoke out against the Soviet invasion of Hungary. Not far from Beijing, Wu managed to get us into the Qinghe prison farm, where he spent 4 of his 19 years as a political prisoner, and where he says he was nearly starved to death. Entrance is strictly forbidden to anyone but labor camp personnel. But on this day, as we drove 15 miles from one end of the camp to the other, no one stopped us. We could never figure out why. Along the way, we could see prisoners at work building a canal with picks and shovels, which is exactly what Harry Wu did when he was in this prison.
If they catch you doing this, what happens to you?
Go back to the camp again.
You could go back to prison.
Of course, they will put me back again.
Why are you doing it then?
Because I think the world have to realize there's a camp system in China.
A prison camp system modeled on the now defunct Soviet Gulag, which experts say is made up of several thousand labor camps and millions of prisoners. Most prisoners are forced to sign confessions before they're even tried, and once convicted, few have a realistic chance to appeal their sentences. Human rights groups say brainwashing and torture are rampant. How many political prisoners are there? Recent secret Chinese documents indicate that approximately 1 in 10 are in prison for political reasons, says China scholar Orville Schell, who was our consultant on this story.
We don't really know how many prisoners there are. Let's take 5 million. It's a totally arbitrary number, and we can't be much more definite, but that means that there's 500,000 political prisoners. That's a lot of political prisoners.
All prisoners, including political prisoners, are supposed to reform themselves by doing forced labor, reform through labor, as the Chinese call it. And this is one of the prison factories where reform through labor takes place, a plant on a busy street in Shanghai that makes hand tools. From the front, it looks like a normal factory, but behind the facade on a side street, the barbed wire and the guard tower are unmistakable. In Beijing, Teng Zhiguang, who is Vice Minister of Foreign Economic Relations and Trade, the government ministry in charge of China's exports, repeated to us the commitment his government reputedly made to President Bush.
No question, but that the policy of the government says that products made through forced labor will not be exported from this country.
No,
Under no conditions.
under no condition.
Posing as a Chinese-American businessman who wanted to import hand tools, Harry Wu met with officials at the Shanghai Liaodong Machinery Factory, the prison factory that makes the tools. Wu asked about purchasing some to sell in the United States and secretly recorded the conversation. Remember, it is illegal for forced labor goods from any country to be sold in the U.S.
We would like to speak quite openly with you because in the U.S., Congress recently made a big deal about the special nature of our kind of enterprises.
What about the special nature of your enterprise?
Our products are never exported directly. We always go through the import-export company system.
As far as I know, the U.S. has a trade law that prevents importation of products made by prison labor.
But we will be exporting indirectly.
But they'll be able to find out. This will give us trouble because the customs will find out.
Not if we don't export directly.
We invited the prison officials to another meeting in a Shanghai hotel room and secretly recorded our conversation. Harry Wu introduced me as the president of the American company interested in importing their hand tools. I told them that the one thing that bothered me was the reliability of their prison workforce.
Given that these people are what you call reformed through labor, we would call forced labor, that they're reliable. I mean, that they turn out a good quality product.
They told me there'd be no problem, that their factory had been in business for 41 years.
You know, I have to be honest with you, Mr. Tong. I have spoken to officials in Shanghai, of the Shanghai Liaodong machine plant, which uses forced labor. They said they don't export directly. They do it through export-import companies.
It's not to my knowledge, in the first place. No prison-related manufacturing facilities has been ever given the right to engage in foreign trade. They're not allowed.
I saw it with my own eyes. It's not in some obscure part of the country. It's in the middle of Shanghai. Prison officials have told me that they want our business. They could export to the United States, and there was a way to get around the problem of the United States Congress by doing it through an export-import company.
To me, it's inconceivable.
I heard.
They're not supposed to.
But they're doing it.
Then they are violating the government policy, if that is true.
But 3 weeks after we interviewed Vice Minister Tong, the Shanghai prison factory was still sending faxes to Harry Wu trying to sell those prison-made goods.
Can you understand that Americans don't want products made by these people under forced labor exported to the United States?
As a matter of policy, the Chinese government never allows the export of what you call forced labor product.
This may be China's official policy, but we had no trouble finding that numerous government-owned Chinese enterprises are violating it with impunity. In the forced labor camp where they process sheepskin and leather, Harry Wu asked the prison manager about importing his forced labor products to the U.S. No problem, the plant boss told him, and then he gave Harry Wu the name and address of the import-export firm in Hong Kong that could handle the transaction. So we went to Hong Kong and met the middlemen, the Winmate Trading Company. Once again, we pretended to be importers. They told us a lot of these prison-made leather goods are finished in Korea and sold in the U.S. So we invited them to a meeting that we secretly videotaped. This time our sound man, Ned Hall, posed as the company president.
The laborers themselves are prisoners.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you had experience with this kind of labor in the past? Have you found it to be dependable?
Yeah, they have their own regulation, and also we send our people to keep on checking the quality also.
Yes.
Once we report to them, the quality is not up to standard, the prisoner will have the punishment or beating or some other thing.
Do you think that the government of China is capable of enforcing a policy of no forced labor exports?
Absolutely.
Absolutely? Then how was it that the Volvo company received a letter on behalf of China's labor camp enterprises offering to provide, quote, a large number of criminals as very cheap labor to foreign manufacturers.
How would you represent this letter to Volvo?
As I say, I do not know. It's not to my knowledge. I've never heard of this.
I'll show you the letter. I'd be happy to show you the letter. We hear that you want to build plants in Asia. We would like you to build a plant in China, and we will be able to provide a reliable, cheap workforce of prisoners.
I don't know. This name is not even known to me.
You think this is a mistake?
Either a mistake or the letter itself is in doubt.
Then perhaps you can explain to me the 1989 law book, the law yearbook of China, which is published by Beijing's Law Publishing House, said that in 1988 alone, the value of products for export made by forced labor increased by 21%. Now, these are the figures published by your government, by government publication. It's in print. How would you respond to that?
I never know it.
You never know it. Now, your position is what? You're the Vice Minister
of Mulford.
Of Mulford, which is in charge of export
and import.
And import. And you don't know that?
No, it has never happened.
That comes from a government publication.
Government publication can make mistakes.
We pointed out to Vice Minister Tung that numerous government publications brag about the use of forced labor for export. One official prison reform journal says the labor reform enterprises throughout the country have great potential for developing exports and earning foreign exchange.
Minister, it comes from your own government publications.
As I say, even those publications make mistakes.
Vice Minister Tung says he can't understand why China's most favored nation trade status should depend on issues he says have nothing to do with trade.
Including human rights, arms control, forced labor, as we talked about.
So that China's continuing most favored nation trade status should have nothing to do with human rights in this country.
No, not in my
will. Should have nothing to do with forced labor in this country.
No.
It is only about business.
Business is business.
The Hong Kong government is expected to introduce legislation next week that would ban the trade in human organs from China. The Taiwanese government is expected to follow suit shortly. Now, they're responding to pressure from human rights groups who protest that China is using executed prisoners to supply human organs. About 2,000 such operations are performed in China every year, many on foreigners who pay up to £30,000 for a kidney transplant. China says the consent of the prisoner is obtained in advance. You may find some of the pictures in this report by Sue Lloyd-Roberts disturbing.
Sentencing to death in China is a public affair. On special days like National Day and the New Year, which are televised, the number can swell to 100 in one day. The crimes of these young people, some only teenagers, range from murder to car theft or mere political dissent. The prisoners are taken immediately to the execution site and killed with efficiency and the minimum of ceremony. But the story doesn't end here. As the prisoners are prepared, an unmarked van leaves the local hospital carrying the doctors and equipment necessary to extract the prisoner's organs immediately after death at the execution site. Young prisoners, those under 25, are the preferred targets for this purpose. The Chinese tell you that it enables the condemned men to pay their debt back to society. In this hospital in central China, I was allowed to film a patient as he was prepared to receive an organ. Chinese doctors now working in the West say that 90% of the organs used in transplants come from executed prisoners, and there's a lucrative trade developing in patients coming to China for this purpose from America, Europe, and nearby Hong Kong.
It's believed hundreds of foreigners are coming to China every year for their kidney transplants to hospitals like this in Canton that services the Hong Kong market, and that the number is increasing all the time. What worries human rights organizations is the possible connection between this growing business and the increase in the number of death sentences being handed out in China today.
There is no system of voluntary organ donors in China, and patients recovering in the transplant wards tell you that executed prisoners make ideal organ donors.
They told me my kidney came from an executed prisoner because you get them fresh that way. Because from the taking out of the kidney, it is only a few hours to get it transplanted in me.
But at Hospital Number 1 in Chengdu, they're delighted with the commercial benefits of the system. They're rebuilding here at the cost of $8 million, money, they say, that's coming from patients from abroad. There are luxuries here unheard of for locals, like rooms with televisions and ensuite bathrooms, but ideal for patients from Hong Kong, Japan, and America, who pay the hospital around $30,000 per transplant. Posing as potential buyers with the American writer and former Chinese dissident Harry Wu, we inquired at the hospital about arranging an operation for a fictitious sick relation. We were told there'd be no problem, and they were used to foreigners.
Most from America?
America, maybe the majority America, and somebody from Macau or Hong Kong or something.
We were then referred to Dr. Yang for an initial consultation, a meeting that I filmed secretly.
The quality of our kidneys is better than in America because we can remove the kidney fast and at the appropriate time. Basically, as soon as we know the donor is brain dead, we can get at the kidney with the minimum fuss. And we can guarantee several kidneys in 1 month. The distance between where we remove the kidney and the transplant is short. We can do it all in less than 10 hours. In America, it takes more than 20 hours.
All over the world, yeah.
It was then time to discuss money with Comrade Wu, chief party member and foreign liaison officer at the hospital. Again, we had to film it secretly. No, we don't take credit cards, she said. We prefer cash, preferably dollars. Things are done differently in this country compared with yours. We can do what is impossible from the legal point of view in your country. But she got quite agitated when we asked her outright whether the organs came from prisoners.
I'm not talking about whether it is prisoners or not. In China, we believe that it is much better if not too many people get involved in this kind of thing. My point is that you would be well advised not to get involved in this. It could get complicated.
Most of the information about the execution and transplant program in China comes from outside, from expatriate Chinese like Gao Peiji, former deputy police commander, who's currently seeking political asylum in Britain. He fled China after exposing corruption among his colleagues, and he's familiar with the detail of the executions.
There are
2,300 towns and provincial centers in China, and each has a prison where every year they carry out a number of executions. So at the very least, we are talking about several thousand, maybe even more than 10,000 executions in China a year. In the north, all the executions are carried out by shooting in the head. That way it leaves the organs intact in the rest of the body to be removed for transplant. For the most part, they remove handcuffs and leg irons from the prisoner before tying his hands behind his back with a rope. They also put a rope around his neck to stop him shouting out anti-government slogans before he dies. In the south, they sometimes shoot in the heart. That way they can get at the corneas for transplant. The executioners stab the prisoners in the back with a bayonet. to make the body go rigid, to ensure that the marksman can get a good shot.
The Chinese government have admitted that they use the organs of executed prisoners, but they say it happens only in rare instances and only with the consent of the person executed. According to the 1984 laws on the use of dead bodies or organs from condemned criminals, organs can be taken from uncollected dead bodies, or the ones that family members refuse to collect, and from those condemned criminals who themselves or whose families give consent. But Mr. Gao disagrees.
In
the 10 years that I worked for the Public Security Bureau, I never saw or heard anything to suggest that death row prisoners were asked for consent before donating organs. Nor was the family asked. In fact, more often than not, the prisoner's family would be held under house arrest by the Public Security Bureau while the execution was taking place. Only by agreeing to pay the authorities for the urn would they be allowed to come and collect the ashes.
In most villages and towns in China today, you'll find execution notices. Human rights organizations claim that the number of death sentences being passed in China today is higher than at any time since the 1950s. Here, a notice with 4 young people under 25 sentenced to death in towns hundreds of miles from their own homes. They're among the millions of mainly young people who are roaming China looking for work today. It's often these people who turn to crime and who, anonymous and far from home, become death row prisoners and then, unwittingly, organ donors.
We know in Chinese political environment, once one become a criminal, especially a political criminal, most of the family must openly denounce them. No one dares to pick up the body. So it becomes the government properties. At present, there's 70 million people is traveling around in the country looking for a job. And most of them are young, low education peasants. If once they commit the crimes, it's sentenced and executed far away from their native lands, most of the family are not available to pick up their body.
It's the involvement of doctors in China in this operation that appalls the medical profession in the West, and especially reports of organs being removed before execution, that is, vivisection. This is confirmed by a doctor who has since fled China and must remain anonymous. He says he was part of a team that was ordered to take both kidneys from prisoners who were still alive.
I was ordered to take both kidneys from an anesthetized prisoner. Without both kidneys, a person dies within 24 hours. After I had sewn him up, the organs were taken away by helicopter. Of course, kidneys are better fresh, and I can only assume they were for a high-ranking party member.
For decades, the people of China have been the victims of one of the most ruthless penal systems in the world. Today, that system is making them victims of the marketplace too.
Thank you very much. We're going to open the floor to questions from students. We have 2 microphones here, 1 at each end. We have 2 microphones up in the balcony there. We'll start with questions on the floor. And Mr. Wu has kindly agreed to answer your questions. Let me just say, please, in the interest of time, we hope that you'll pose questions and not have discussions. We have Mr. Wu here to discuss today. So please keep your questions brief. And shall we start on this side, this lady right here? Mr. Wu?
Hi, Mr. Wu. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for coming out to speak to us. I think your brevity and courage is to be highly commended. And you've become an international role model, I think, for those of us who have made ourselves concerned with human rights violations. I'd just like to ask you, as we approach the handing back of Hong Kong to China, I've noticed, I've picked up a lot of interviews with businessmen and officials from Hong Kong who seem to believe that promises the Chinese government have made to allow them to remain, excuse me, running the colony the way they have been will be kept. I was just wondering how you believe. Do you believe that the Chinese are making these promises to minimize opposition, or do you really believe that they'll keep the promises?
The promises come from Deng Xiaoping, come from Beijing government. They guarantee one China, two systems, can up to 50 years, maybe 100 years. The question is, who guarantee Deng Xiaoping? Who guarantee Beijing government?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank
Who guarantee Deng Xiaoping? You believe? Check the credit. Check the communist government credit.
Okay, so we'll take a question from this side, please.
Hi, I have a similar question. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were about the 97 transfer of power and what Hong Kong citizens might expect and what warnings you might have.
Hong Kong, after 1997, no more as a Hong Kong. It's finished. Just I mentioned the previous question is, because this is guaranteed by communist government, and they never keep their words. Communists are liars. They lie about big things, small things. They told the Chinese communism was the only heaven, only future. They tried to tell the Chinese people Mao is the God. And this is the liars. Let me go this way. I natively come from China. My view is Hong Kong as a colonial land is a shame of me, of all the Chinese. So we have to take it back. Sorry. In 1988, is my first time I went to Hong Kong. I saw this tiny rocky island. I'm very surprised why this rocky island become an international financial center. 95, maybe more than 95 of the population Hong Kongese come from China. Maybe 2 generations ago, maybe just recently. But why the same people, they cannot establish a same financial center in other places in China, but only on this small, tiny rocky island? I think there's one of the reasons. Hong Kong was under a very different political, economic system. And that system, after 1997, is finished.
Do you think there'll be a lot of resistance for those citizens who have been used to a different system?
The system is communism system. I don't think they will keep it. Beijing government try to keep it because this is the place, Hong Kong like a chicken, supply the golden egg to the Beijing government. They know it. They got a big, big profit from these places. The problem is their concept, their habit, their idea, their system, political view is so different. And most of the Hong Kongese have to experience what is communist totalitarian regime. You see, these people are scary and leaving. Nobody trusts it at all.
Thank you.
Well, there's a question here at this microphone.
What's your current take on the current posturing between China and Taiwan right now, and the more or less subtle struggle for power within African nations?
Excuse me? Will you repeat the question?
Just talking about the posturing between China and Taiwan, and what you think about the more subtle struggle for power in African nations.
I think mostly Taiwan issue in current stage is come from Beijing, come from the internal struggle of the leadership of Beijing. In current situation, Chinese government not available have a military invasion applied to Taiwan. The reason is today Chinese the economic situation, economy booming, economic development, mostly the fuel is come from the Western cash. They need it. If everything happened in Taiwan strict, the only one result, the Western cut off the financial support, and there will become a serious disaster for Beijing government. So I don't think in this moment Chinese want to take a very serious invasion to attack to Taiwan. But why are they using the military trident? Because Jiang Zemin just come to the power 5 years ago. And you know, he don't have any resource in military system and don't have any resource in party system. He just picked up by Deng Xiaoping. But in the 5 years, he tried to establish his own kingdom. And he needed support from the military. And military system always want to take advantage in any issue, what they want. And Taiwan is one of it. So today, most of these frightened is really come from military officers. And they try to do something they want. But I think some of the people in Beijing government realize if we take any further step, that not only hurt Taiwan or other countries, but will seriously damage the Beijing government.
I had the second question, the one about the exertion of power within African nations.
He would like to go on to that, if you don't mind. Thank you. Yes, the question here, please.
Hi, Mr. Wu. I was wondering what you think of American policy towards China, considering that once you were detained and the media was paying a lot of attention, the U.S. was vehement in denouncing the government, but now that, let's say, Wei Jing-sung, who you would probably agree is the #1 Chinese human rights advocate, has been rearrested, that the U.S. has done absolutely nothing. And I was wondering what you think about that.
Wei Jing-sung is a real hero. He deserved to win the Nobel Peace Prize. I was released on February 79 because Deng Xiaoping come to the power, you have to make some adjustment. And most of these old generation counter-revolutionary either physically destroyed or mentally destroyed. But at that moment, Chinese Communist Party faced a new situation, new threat from the new generation, like Wei Jing-sung. Wei Jing-sung is the representative of this new generation. So next month, March 1979, they arrested Wei Jing-sung, replaced the old generation. After 15 years, the suffering, brutality, year and year, did not keep Wei Jing-sung silent. Even they released in advance 6 months, try to gain the Olympic 2000 hold in Beijing. But this is a really stupid trick, and nobody believed it. And Wei Jing-sung still keeping his voice. So Chinese rearrested and sent him 14 years. This is a very, very strong signal. It means the government in Beijing is so weak. They so care about it. A single person voicing, they really worry about it. I'll be honest with you. If that happened in 1950 or 1960, under the Mao years, my case, Wei Jing-sung case, quite simple. Go to the execution ground, kill it, finish. American protest, forget it. So what? But they right now have to care the pressure from outside. Of course, I have a little bit different with Wei Jing-sung today because I have American passport. Yes, in my interrogation, the senior police told me, saying, hey, we treat you very different. You're full, you have the full, same as me. Okay? I was never be in the detention center. I'll be honest with you, I live in a conditional, air-conditioned room. Okay? In the guest house, I'm only the guest. And probably 60 policemen, most of them is a plainclothes police. Well, you can say they service for me. They take care of me. Wei Jing-sung today moved from Beijing to a very large salt farm located in Hebei province. But his treatment is so different. But when they told me, the interrogator told me, so because you have American passport, we treat it differently, I feel very sad. I feel kind of guilty. Because Wei Jing-sung, same as you, as me, as a human being. They have to treat it by justice, by fair. And yes, it is American government act on my case. One of the reasons because I'm an American citizen. The government has the responsibility to care about his own citizen. But if we really want to do something, we really want to care about something, according to American principle, freedom, democracy, and liberty, and we have to care about what we do. Unfortunately, the human rights issue was deleted by President Clinton in 1994 with the trade, and American government today don't have the leverage. And unfortunately, I do remember in 1993 president election, President Clinton denounced the Beijing authorities. In 1993, he placed an executive order on most favored nation treaty status from China. And the thing is changing. That's why I ask you, urge everyone, talk to your lawmakers, talk to your politicians, thinking about we need a real China policy.
Thank you. Next question, please.
I was wondering what your thoughts are in terms of the potential power struggle within Beijing once Deng Xiaoping dies. Also in terms of with respect to possible changes within the Chinese political system, such things as the Logai system, the continuing of economic reforms, as well as the slow ebbing of power away from Beijing to the provinces.
Whatever Deng Xiaoping is still alive or dead, China is significantly and rapidly changing, and nobody can stop it. In the first 30 years under Chinese communist ruling, there's so many serious political and economic crises. For example, the Cultural Revolution, everybody knows about it. And particularly in 1960, 1962, in the so-called during the 3 years famine, 25 to 40 million people starved to death. That kind of crisis, it happened in any country, anywhere, only have one result: turn down the dynasty, turn down the government. But it didn't happen in China. Why? Of course, there's many reasons, many factors. But one of the very important reasons is the majority of Chinese, they believe communism was our only future. Mao is my God. I trust it. Even my father is under persecution. Even my mother is dying in the starvation. I still want to follow the Chairman Mao. And this is very strong energy as an important factor in the Chinese personal life. But today, communism as an idea is totally dead. Nobody trusts it, even member of the party. Even I would say maybe Deng Xiaoping don't trust it. What is communism at all? Okay. That will cause a big problem. If we say Chinese communist regime as a construction, as a huge building, maybe in the first 30 years, the building is damaged, heavily damaged. Well, but the post of the building is still very strong, stable. But today, because the economy boom, the building looks nicely. Okay. The living condition is much better than before. The opportunity for the common people is more and more wide expanded. Many people can come to travel outside and can come over here as a students and do business. But the most of the post of the building, I would say, is already damaged. Everything could be changed. And the building can be collapsed in any moment. But communism system dismissed in China doesn't mean China right away turn into a democratic society. Because communist regime actually is one of the dynasty in our feudalism system from 2,000, 3,000 years ago. For the whole system to change, get out of the totalitarian system, takes several generations to change it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I realize that there are many other students with questions. We're being signaled to cut the questions at this time. I hate to have to do that, but I'm being told that we have to. Perhaps Mr. Wu would like to take, he says, a couple more. So we'll do that, and then we'll end it. The police officers say we don't have much time, so I'll ask you to ask brief questions, and Mr. Wu, if we could be very brief there, ready to escort us back to the next place. You will have a chance to talk with him later. So please, I will take this question first.
I'm just curious if you plan on going back to China at all.
Of course, not in this moment. They told me when I was in the deportation, waiting for the deportation, the police say, okay. At that time, you have to know the senior police also, they are human beings as me, They have kind of a consciousness and say, I just want to advise you, don't come back. If you come back, they will put you back to the jail, serve you for 15 years. And we do know sooner or later you will come again. Yes, China is my motherland. Nobody has the rights to deprive my rights. And nobody can force me to go. They cannot stop me in the past. They definitely cannot stop me in the future. This is my place. China is belong to the people. I'm one of the people. China does not belong to the Communist Party.
And you had a short question?
Yes, certain U.S. products are the produce of U.S. prison labor, and I was wondering, given your experience in the relation between prison labor and commercial profit, I was wondering whether you think that this very principle of this relation is worthy of investigation.
You're talking about American government today?
Well, I'm talking about in any country, well, including America, which has certain products are the produce of certain prisons, say in Florida and places. I was wondering whether this very principle between prison labor and profits from products that are being produced by prison labor is something that is worthy of investigation.
Yes, today there are several countries going to follow up, because not only United States but also United Kingdom have the law to forbidden convict labor and prison-made products. But be honest with you, I raising this question, raising this issue to ban the forced labor product importation. I just using the federal law to leading the people aware. Today in communist China, there's a huge forced labor camp slavery system, because the accumulation of the detention order leading the people ask one question: why so many products made by forced labor in China? And how many people, how many men and women was locked behind a bar? And where are they? Who are they? And why these people forced labor, and how you forced it? This is one of the ways, just like a harvest organ from the death row prisoners, from different angle to leading the people aware what is Chinese laogai. This is my view, my intention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wu. Now we're going to take a break for lunch, and it is now 1:30. I'd ask the two students who are in line if you'd like to come up forward after this is over. Thank you all for coming out today, and I'd like to announce that at 4 o'clock this afternoon there is a special conference in the Taubman Room on Asian American and African American relationships. And that's at Taubman Center here. And then tomorrow at 4 we're having Miss Angela Oh, topic revitalizing Asian American activism. She's a Korean American leader from Los Angeles, and she'll be here tomorrow at the Taubman Center at 4 o'clock. Thank you all for coming out, and let's thank Mr. Wu again, please.